So about a few years ago, an Indian friend of mine shared an enraged post about the abortion laws in the United States. I think this was a post by Refinery 29. Basically, she objected to the various conditions placed by US states on abortion, and justifiably so. However, this very friend of mine was completely oblivious to the fact that while many US states still allow abortion post the 20-week limit, in the case of rape, incest, etc., in India, in stark contrast, the abortion law, the Medical Practitioners Act 1971, makes no such provision and is prima facie an outdated law. Now, another friend of mine, a self-proclaimed feminist who wears a "We Should All Be Feminist" t-shirt, casually called a third friend an untouchable the other day, not knowing the weight, the continued oppression, and the cruel history that shadows the word she so casually uses as an insult. A third friend, actually an acquaintance I follow on Instagram, was a strong supporter of Hillary Clinton during the US presidential election in 2016, but was completely silent on her political standpoint and the importance of casting a vote during the recent Telangana Assembly election in December 2018. Now, while the internet calls this tendency pseudo-intellectualism or pseudo-liberalism, I beg to differ, chiefly because of the negativity it attributes to a well-intentioned yet largely misdirected effort. I think the more appropriate word for this genre of advocacy that dictates the mind of the modern Indian from pre-teens to 30-somethings is woke activism. And through my talk, I intend to deconstruct it in 2 steps. So the first step will be to address any existing cynicism about social media. But before I proceed with the first step, I have 2 questions, to which you may respond with a show of hands. Now, how many of you have actually temporarily quit social media or gone on a social media detox? Okay. Second question, how many of you have been cynical about social media, but nonetheless continue to use it anyway? If there's one indisputable inference I can draw from your response, it is that, love it or hate it, social media is here to stay, and there's pretty much nothing we can do about it. And those of you who are cynical, you're not alone. I myself spend and continue to spend a large portion of my time trying to seek a divorce from my Instagram and Facebook account, only to be spammed by Nidhi or being missed mail, to which I succumb and log back in, and that's probably a vicious cycle I'll be victim to for the rest of my life. You see, having found any and all interactions on these platforms superficial and an eyewash, I refuse to believe that any good could come from using them. But my cynicism was put to task by 3 key events on social media. The first was an international and a national one. It was when the #MeToo hashtag gave millions of women a voice and held hundreds of men accountable both morally and legally. In fact, this hashtag went on to become the most trending advocacy hashtag of 2018, used 1.5 million times on Instagram alone. The next event was a local one. It was when Spurti Kolipaka, a social worker, told me about a group she founded called Keyboard Activists, with the aim of using social media to draw the attention of parliamentarians, the public, and politicians to local issues. In fact, pretty recently, the group used the hashtag Appoint Chairperson and Women's Commission Matters to draw KTR's attention to the inefficiency of the Telangana Women's Commission. And by the way, that hashtag became the most trending hashtag that day, viewed 21,000 times in less than 20 minutes. Now, the third event was a slightly unconventional one. It was when an egg became the most liked picture on Instagram, garnering 51 million likes, dethroning Kylie Jenner. To put it in perspective, that's more than half the social media using population globally. Now, while the first 2 are pretty self-explanatory, you're probably wondering where am I going with the third one. You see, if an egg can get 51 million likes, can bring 51 million people together in solidarity to dethrone Kylie Jenner, to launch a website and sell merchandise, and to use the proceeds of that merchandise for charity and talk about mental health, then the joke's on me for underestimating the power of a like, a tweet, a share, or pretty much anything that happens on social media in its ability to mobilize change. It was after these 3 events that I decided to leave my cynicism behind in 2018 and actually use this very same enemy as a friend to trigger change. In fact, I realized that courtesy social media activism and advocacy is no longer limited to social workers, but rather something each of us can indulge in. Which brings me to point number 2 of my talk, which is redirecting discourse from what's trending to what's relevant. Now, before I move on to this, again, I have 2 more questions to which you may respond with a show of hands. How many of you disagree with the cynicism and believe that social media is actually capable of triggering change? All right, that's good news. Now, how many of you have actually used social media to disseminate useful information? Again, great news. But according to Google's year in review, for the past 3 consecutive years, in fact, for the years before that as well, both globally and in India, there has been significant Western influence over what's trending. So what that basically means is what we're sharing and what we're doing on social media, although important, is most probably not relevant to our immediate surroundings. Although solace may be found in the fact that this isn't necessarily your fault. You see, most of what we're doing on social media boils down to what's trending or what's woke, which essentially means it boils down to the issue of the month that Now This and meme accounts are talking about, or the issue of the month that Western media is talking about. Now, you're probably wondering, where is she going with this? I mean, what is woke? I, for one, favor a humorous interpretation of this word by Urban Dictionary, which I agree is no Merriam-Webster, but nonetheless aptly describes the word as a state of perceived intellectual superiority one gains by reading the Huffington Post. Now, this again catapults us to many other important questions. One such being, why must an issue be trending for us rising third world liberals to deem it important? What can shift the spotlight in this wave of activism dictated by convenience towards equally pressing issues that are all but missing a hashtag? Now, don't get me wrong here. While my attempt is not to name and shame keyboard activists for having and using their voices or to trivialize global issues, what I'm trying to do here is to steer this very positive rise in liberal thinking in the right direction. I believe that instead of limiting ourselves to talking about what's trending, we could also be talking about what's relevant to our immediate surroundings as well. And this begins with us learning 4 lessons. The first is to learn and unlearn. Now, for instance, this very same people who were opposed to the Yulin Dog Meat Festival and shared posts about it all over Instagram and all over Facebook are also the same people who post photographs of themselves in petting zoos where animals that are meant to be out in the wild are domesticated and subjected to abuse. So my point here is, don't limit your social media your social activism to your phone screens as a metric of your virtual intellect. Instead, use it as a chance to introspect on your choices and to probably be a better person. Because you see, you can't criticize your neighbor for a messy front lawn when your own backyard is a mess, can you? Now, the second lesson to be learned is to avoid misinformation. The best example I can think of in this context is when BuzzFeed World, a prominent social media news company, shared a post on September 6th about how the Supreme Court had struck down Section 377. A lot of people I knew, a lot of Indian friends, shared this post without even questioning its authenticity, when in actuality, the Supreme Court only struck down a part of Section 377 and not the entirety of it. So again, my point here is, don't blindly believe what you see simply because it's accompanied by an empowering video or an empowering hashtag or an empowering photo. Instead, dig deeper. Learn more. The internet is your portable library. Use it to be better informed. Now, the third lesson to be learned is, don't hold an opinion simply because it is what's woke. I think the best example in this context is people supporting Hillary Clinton because there was no other option, or people opposing Donald Trump because he has small hands or orange hair. Instead of actually questioning the basis behind such opposition or behind such support. Again, my point here is, don't follow something because that's what you think is right and not because it's the status quo. The fourth lesson to be learned, and in my opinion the most important, is think global, act local. Now, while this phrase finds its application mainly to do with our environmental footprint, I also think it's completely applicable to social media activism as well. You see, being globally and locally conscious need not be mutually exclusive. It's okay to be an active contributor to something that is globally trending, but if you're not emulating that on a local and an independent level, then you will have little to no impact, and people will most definitely call you a pseudo-intellectual. So, my bottom line with this entire talk is that change is the only constant. All those of you who are cynical about social media must understand that the glass is half full, and social media is capable of bringing about positive change. And all those of you who are a step ahead must steer this very positive change in the right direction, away from groupthink and away from stagnation, from being more than just a fad and a byproduct of hype. You see, if there's one thing I've learned since the birth of Orkut, it's that the internet was Tesla's way of giving us a light bulb. Now there are multiple applications for a light bulb. You can either use a light bulb to light up the world and make it a brighter place, or you can also use a light bulb as a detonator and have all of this blow up. Either way, the potential it holds is in your hands, and it's completely up to you how you want to use it. I, for one, would like to believe that we are more than capable of being more than a part of the hashtag herd, and we're capable of not restricting ourselves to the trending issue of the month, and if we do so, we are limitless, unstoppable, and capable of snowballing change both internally as well as around us. Thank you.